chucked it down with rain. There was mud everywhere up to your ankles. And if you wanted to go for a number 2 in a Portaloo, Jesus H. Christ, the poo and the toilet paper was overflowing above the seat that you sit on. I mean, imagine that. Imagine trying to go and have a poo and you're already touching someone else's poo. That's not remotely funny. That's not remotely fun. That's about as funny as watching a corgi licking sherbet off a cock. And that's not... That is bloody hilarious. Welcome, you legends and heli heads, you choppers and stick bangers, you amazing twizzle whizzlers, and you beautiful human being subscribers. Welcome to this episode on HeliShed. Now, June the 14th, 15th and 16th, it was the Weston Park International Model Air Show, of which part of that is HELIFEST. And what a bloody HELIFEST it was. Bottom line up front, legends, it was a fantastic event. Massive kudos to the event organisers. Another raging success, which I think is their 14th year on the bounce. Absolutely fair play. The standard of 3D flying was out of this world in all of the classes. The sports and intermediates, the pro class, the international class was absolutely first class. The event on Friday and some of Saturday was hampered by fairly heavy rain, and that ensured that the whole of the estate that HELIFEST was on, i.e. Weston Park, was absolutely a quagmire. And I'll put some pictures here so you can see them. Mud everywhere, and it made transiting the whole area, you know, hazardous. And by that I mean slippy trippy and also absolutely covered in mud. So if you went to the event and you didn't prepare for, you know, bad weather and mud everywhere, then, you know, apart from your cars, which were absolutely covered, you know, you would have been covered in mud as well. Weston Park International Model Air Show and of course HELIFEST can't be held to account for bad weather. I mean, bad weather is bad weather. But I do feel for the estate management team of Weston Park, who will take the best part of a year to recover that ground. Absolutely no question of that. Now, you'll be perhaps glad to hear that what I'm not going to do is start going over who became first, second, third in each of the flying categories. There's some great channels out there and they'll be covering that, I'm sure, and they'll cover it far better than I will. And I also know that HELIFEST UK aims to produce some videos that summarise the event and the winners, runners up and third place, etc. But you know what, I don't really think it matters, having been there for the Saturday and the Sunday. You know, everyone out there was a winner in my view. Even those who went out flew in the free fly. I didn't see anyone flying dangerously. I didn't see anyone flying poorly. Everyone flew absolutely fantastic. In fact, I'm glad I didn't fly this year. You would have seen some right shit if I had done. Of course, the event was sponsored by AT Models and by Midland Helicopter. Had a good presence by Heli Shop. All of them had their team pilots there, and yeah, you know, they flew amazing. I got to mix with pretty much all of them, I think, especially the Heli Shop pilots. They were very accommodating to me, and I'll touch a little bit on HeliShed presence at HELIFEST at the very end, if I may. But yeah, it was a really good event. So hats off and kudos, as I said, to the event organisers, to the three main providers of our RC components and helicopters in this hobby, and of course everyone who flew and everyone who attended at HELIFEST. Hats off, cap doffed, I salute you all. At the end of Sunday, the event organisers asked us all collectively, it being the 14th one that they've run, if there are any advice or any comments or any constructive criticism, then they were very happily with their arms open waiting to hear it on how they can make the event better. And look, I done that last year in that video up there. I'm not going to repeat myself, but what I will say is that there are some ideas in there on how to perhaps make HELIFEST even better than it is, if that's at all possible. And that's by using a bit of diversity and a bit of inclusion with other types of flying and other types of styles perhaps, and it will broaden itself to a much wider audience. HELIFEST is unanimously linked to solely 3D flying, And a good portion of this hobby just aren't interested in 3D flying. So to the event organisers, I say, look, if you can, watch the whole video, there are some ideas in there, and I'll very happily sort of reach out to the event organisers for a conversation, or anyone else who wants to have a chat. That video that I linked earlier on, is nothing other than absolutely emphatically celebrating the event organisers for what they do for this hobby, and where it examines the sort of three-way fight, as I call it, between the pilots. Well, I sort of still stick to that. It's still very much that, but then, what else would it not be if it would not be that? So a year later, I sort of disagree with my own point that I made. And of course, I accept that perhaps I was wrong with regards to sponsorships and how that works. I'm a year further into the hobby and a year further on in my understanding of how it all works. So, I was there openly this year with my Heli Shed hat on, waiting for someone to come and poke my chest, which I would have very happily had a conversation with them and discussed it with them, but no one did. So you know what? Perhaps we're all grown up enough to know that we've all got a freedom of speech, and we've all got our own ideas about things. Simple as that. Also at HELIFEST, you'll never ever get a better time where you've got those three players in the same place with all of their wares, second-hand helicopters, amazing discounts where you can go out and treat yourself. Even if Mrs. Helished isn't with you.
I think I just peed a little.
Right, on to some bad things about the event, and not aimed at HELIFEST at all, and that's not me being nepotistic at all, because helicopters are my love, and so is HELIFEST. No, not at all. I've made it very clear in this video and in my video last year, there are some things that can be done by HELIFEST to make it better. Whether the event organisers do it or not, that's down to them. So look, I'm not going over this same old ground, but there are some things that need to be addressed, and I'm going to use this platform to do it. Why? Well, it's my channel for a start. It's a channel that is endemically part of my hobby. My hobby is here, and this feeds YouTube. They don't exist for YouTube. YouTube could disappear tomorrow. I'm not remotely bothered. So if anyone gets really upset about this and the points that I make and they want to reach out to me, by all means reach out, but bring an A game. That's all I'm going to say on that. The first thing that I'm going to mention about the whole event, particularly Weston Park International Model Air Show, because that was the whole event, HELIFEST is a small part of it, and that is the situation with the Portaloos and the toilets. 1, there weren't enough of them. 2, they weren't emptied regularly enough. 3, they weren't maintained. And 4, when you see little kids, being taken under a tree and having to squat there to have a number 2 because they can't go to a Portaloo, not because there's a massive queue, because there aren't enough of them, but because when you open the door to that Portaloo, the contents of inside the Portaloo are overflowing above that of the seat, then I'm afraid that is a failure of event organisation at the utmost level. And, I'm in that industry. Someone would have got fired this morning. No question about that. Stand up, you, pack your bags, fuck off. It's not acceptable. Weston Park organisers for the International Model Air Show are fully aware of how many people go to that event every single year. There wasn't one set of toilets that weren't utterly disgusting by virtue of the fact that the contents were overflowing, or some people decided to crap inside the Portaloo on the floor. I'd like to think, if you can say that in the same sentence, but I'd like to think that was young kids, etc. But I saw the size of them poos, and my God, that couldn't come out the arse of a 5-year-old. Portaloos. There weren't enough of them. They weren't cleaned out. They should have been maintained, and they should have had the old snooper come along at least 2 or 3 times during that event, and they didn't. And for that, take a big stand up and fail. You should have had Portaloos there that were just for children. Next year, I expect to see more Portaloos, and Portaloos clearly defined for men, women and children. Because to be perfectly frank with you, providing there's a hole, a man will happily pee and poo in it. But for the love of God, let's give our women and our children an ounce of decency and respect. At the end of this video will be another video that I'll bolt on at the end of this one, if you're really interested in the next section that I'm going to talk about, and that is the cost of food, drink and ice cream. Now look, I could sit on a pedestal here for hours and hours and hours talking about this, so I'm just going to be very brutally blunt about it right up front. The event organisers and those suppliers of those services should be utterly ashamed of themselves, charging £6 for an ice cream, £3.50 for a cup of tea, £8 for a burger, £7 for some cheesy chips is just unacceptable. You capitalised on the fact that you had a captive, monopolised audience in the middle of nowhere, and by God you made a profit, didn't you? I worked out, even with a cup of tea, with rolling costs, running costs and on costs, paying for things like electricity, fuel running the vehicle, and on costs, salary costs and so on, that you know what? It still doesn't equate to £3.50. And that's not even going into the ice cream. The ice, £6 for an ice cream. Now, did anyone see the ice cream truck with a queue of people there? No. Why not? Because I'm afraid the ice cream truck, just like everywhere else, ramped their prices up so much with the excuse of the cost of living. Utter bullshit. The reason why the cost of living is so high is because everyone is jumping on the bandwagon as an excuse to inflate their prices well above and beyond that which is acceptable. In the video, at the very end of this video, you'll see when I spoke with Gemini, Google's AI, and gave all the breakdown costs of what it costs to buy the ingredients for a cup of tea. And it works out to be about 45 pence at the very most. A cup of tea was being made at 98% profit margin. That is just more than unacceptable. It's fraudulent. So next year, don't buy it. Don't buy an ice cream. Don't buy a burger. Doesn't matter whether you're just going for a day. Take a little camping cooker, take a frying pan, take some burgers and some onions, take a flask of water and some milk and some tea bags and all the rest of it, and do it yourself. It ain't going to cost you £8 a burger or £3.50 a cup of tea. And at the same time, give a burger or a cup of tea to someone who just hasn't got the money to splash out on it in the first place. There were kids that were wandering around that didn't have an ice cream in their hand. And there's absolutely no excuse for that. They should all be able to have an ice cream because their parents should be able to afford an ice cream, and they probably could do if it was priced appropriately. But £6 for an ice cream is just unacceptable. £8 for a burger. Come on. £7 for cheesy chips. On the Saturday evening, it humped it down with rain. I mean, the Lord God himself obviously had a leaky pipe somewhere because it just chucked it down. And unfortunately, Saturday evening is the evening each year when we know there's going to be a fantastic evening pyro flight show on the main flight line, and of course the wonderful fireworks which Weston Park International Model Air Show has become, famous for. And look, the fireworks were great, and I'll cover that in a minute. And to a certain extent, the flying at night was just fantastic as well, particularly the two powered gliders, who for me really took it away. The commentary on the night was far too much. I don't want to hear people talking over the microphone just bollocks when there are two wonderful planes flying up there serenely circling each other with fireworks and sparklers coming off of them. That's not the point. The point is it chucked it down with rain. And when me and my colleagues first went up there, there was a good 3,500 people there, no question. 3,000 to 3,500 people. But as that rain got heavier and heavier and heavier from 8 o'clock in the evening, and it got colder and colder and colder, you might as well have said it was December or in the middle of the desert in the evening. It was absolutely freezing. That 3,500 people wheedled down significantly, I'd say 50%, no question. Kids were crying as they were soaking wet. Mums and dads hurried off, slipping in the mud, carrying their kids under their arm. Meanwhile, the event organisers of Weston Park International Model Air Show think it's appropriate that common sense, and bringing the fireworks display forward, common sense is overridden by program. No, absolutely not. You should have looked at all them people there sitting there getting piss wet through, and kids who were getting piss wet through, and you should have brought the fireworks forward. Absolutely no question about that. And who is the lighting director? Because whoever they are, sack them. You know, we all got blinded to death by lights blaring in our faces from 100 metres away. High-powered lights. Why? What was wrong with putting them along the flight line facing out? Why did you face them all towards us? No one can tell me that it's to do with lighting up the firework area at all, because lighting the firework area would have been done if they were facing out. But you blinded 3,000 people by high-powered lights. You know, just madness. So next year, turn the lights around, and if it chucks it down with rain, bring the fireworks forward. Because you know what? Kids like fireworks. Kids don't like rain and cold. Simple as. The end result is exactly what you saw. Over 1,000 people, if not more, up sticks and leave with kids under their arm, slipping and sliding in the mud and just wanting to get out of there. What a shame. What a shame. Because the fireworks were fantastic. It was beautiful. And a fair play and kudos to the directors of the fireworks and the pyro there. Absolutely brilliant. First class Weston Park, as it is every year. I'm not saying anything that you haven't said to yourselves or haven't heard of before. You know, bloody brilliant. But please, use some common sense. Don't just go by a programme. Sometimes we need to make snap decisions for the good and benefit of those people that have paid £50 each to come and watch it. There you go, legends. That's what I thought of the whole sort of Weston Park International Model Air Show in 2024 and HELIFEST that was part of it. In general terms, you know, a really good event, fantastic fireworks, but you know what? There's some things to work on Weston Park International Model Air Show and the event organisers there, and I've given some suggestions last year to HELIFEST on how perhaps they can broaden and think wider when it comes to the content of HELIFEST. But in general terms, fantastic weekend. On to HeliShed at HELIFEST, and I would personally like to reach out to you all who saw me at HELIFEST and who come up and had conversations with me and with Uncle Bob, otherwise known as Condor. A big thank you. There were lots of you that come up and introduced yourself. There were lots of you who thanked me for the channel. There were lots of you who thanked me for the humour, the good humour and the wackiness of HeliShed, but ultimately still understanding its primary intent and why HeliShed exists. This is a serious hobby. The nature of it is serious and it is costly, and HeliShed is about lightening that load. I use it as an extension of me to have a bit of a laugh with this hobby, but at the same time bring something that's valuable, and I hope that, well, I say I hope that's the case, but it's very clearly that has been the case from the feedback I got this weekend. I was in general terms humbled, and when I came home I indeed told Mrs. HeliShed, wow, I've ate some humble pie this weekend, as people told me, you know, how important the channel has been to them. It's got them out flying helicopters, that they enjoy the content, they enjoy the humour, and, you know, thanking me sincerely for what it is I'm doing for the hobby. Now, to reiterate, I'm not actively doing it for the hobby. It's an extension of my hobby. But if it doubles up and if it helps the hobby, particularly in the UK, then you know what? Fantastic. That's success all round. That's a win-win situation. And I have nothing but love for those of you who recognise that, and indeed for HeliShed and what it stands for. Okay, legends, look, I'm going to leave it there really. Look out for RC Helicopter Richard, look out for RC Helicopter Hub, look out for those channels who are going to do some fantastic content, I know. Do please go along to HELIFEST UK and see their videos produced for the flying this year, which was amazing. And hopefully I've put some indents here during this video so that you can see some of the sort of content that was going on there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut to that video that I told you about where I then spoke to Google's AI about the cost of tea and what that AI thought of it. But my God, you know, £3.50 for a cup of tea. Wow. So until the next time, legends, remember it's all about the journey, and my journey so far has been fantastic, and that has a great deal to do with you and the feedback that I've received this weekend. So thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Right, legends, in order for us to be able to work out how much it should have cost for a cup of tea at Weston Park International Model Air Show, we need to be able to get the ingredients together in order to make a single cup of tea. Well, you can't just go and buy a cup of tea out of Lidl's, can you? So we're going to have to buy bulk ingredients. First of all, 10 styrofoam cups, which are 10 ounce in size at £1.20. Then we're going to have a box of Yorkshire tea, of course, at £5.49. Then we're going to have 1 litre of milk, semi-skimmed, at £1. And then 1 kilo of sugar at £1.09. Now, I now ask the AI 4 questions. Let's look at each one of those in turn. Firstly, question 1. If I use 1 tea bag, 40 millilitres of milk, yes, Mrs. Heli Shed really did work that one out, and 2 teaspoons per cup at approximately 8 grams per spoon, she worked that one out too. What is the actual cost per cup? Question 2. If we assume that the running costs by the supplier are a total of 32% of this cost per cup, which is broken down as 12% running costs and 20% on costs, what then is the revised cost per cup? Now, for those of you not in business, that sort of percentage ratio is a normal way in which a business works out its running costs and indeed any form of on costs for staff. Question 3. If I am sold a cup of tea at a cost of £3.50, we really did pay that. How much total profit is being made by the supplier based upon the revised cost per cup? Question 4. Express the profit made by the supplier as a percentage overall. Got it? Right. How quick does he work it out? Holy shit, legends. You can pause the screen for yourself and read that for yourself. But, well, I've checked it and it's all correct. Let's go to the bottom line. The actual cost per cup is 19 pence. Considering supplier cost, the revised cost per cup is 25 pence. Notice I'm rounding it down. The supplier makes a profit of £3.24, let's round it up, £3.25 per cup. This profit represents a whopping 92.8% of the selling price. Now, if we were to then ask, well, what is that in a total percentage, then actually you can just times 25 pence by however many times, repeating itself until it equals the total selling price, which is £3.50, and that will express in thousands of percent. Is this a fair profit margin by the supplier in your view, Mr. AI? A 92.8% profit margin is very high and may not be considered fair in most retail settings. Here's why. Industry standards, grocery stores typically have a profit margin between 1% and 5% for staple items like tea and sugar, while markup on prepared drinks can be higher. 92.8% seems exceptionally high. Sustainability, such as a higher margin, raises questions about whether the pricing structure is sustainable. It could potentially push customers away or attract competitors who undercut the price. However, it is important to consider some nuances. Unique selling point. Perhaps the supplier offers a unique tea experience or higher quality ingredients that justifies a higher price point. Or the location. If the store has a high operating cost due to rent or location, a larger margin might be necessary to cover expenses and remain profitable. Ultimately, whether this specific margin is fair depends on the factors mentioned above. Well, look, in my view, it ain't fair, so next year take a flask. Or a cooker, some water, a kettle, some tea bags, some sugar, some milk. Do it yourself.